Implausible Nature now has dice. That's right, you can get these awesome D6s made by our partner, Baron of Dice. These custom dice have the Implausible Nature logo on the 6 side and also come with square corners, which means they will roll more evenly than rounded corner dice. Head on over to baronofdice.com and use discount code IN40K to get a discount on your order and support us at the same time. Check out his full collection of dice for all your gaming needs with the link down in the description. Welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. On today's video, we are talking about something that came up because of a Reddit post from Narubi. His post talked about should I choose this or that? And basically, it's about conflicting advice, right? Like, don't do this because of XYZ, and then someone else will say, no, do this because of ABC, right? So
Yeah.
we compiled a list of some of these things, and we're going to talk about them and give you our opinion on what we think. So why don't you start us off, Bob? What do we got?
All right. So this list, we have a little bit of a list, so we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on these, but I think it's kind of fun to talk about some of these things and give you an opinion where we are. But the
Yeah.
first one is don't take transports. The Black Templar are too few to risk it versus take transport because the Black Templar are too slow to slog across the board. So this one is kind of spicy right off the bat, right?
Yeah, right.
So traditionally, our most successful lists are non-transport based. The ones that we have that have won tournaments have been Footsloggers, and primarily, I don't think we necessarily need transports. There's a few outliers. I'm one of them. One of my current tournament lists is using transports. I got 2 sets of them, the impulsors, but traditionally, I don't think we have used them and haven't needed them because we play best in the middle of the board and on our side of the board. That's where our bread and butter is. Yes, we do occasionally go to the other side of the board, but we have the tools to get there with our jump packs. So I don't think it's a necessary piece to our most lists. Now you can build into them, but I don't think it's necessary for them. Yeah, I think that's really where we are. They're nice in certain lists, but it's not a requirement.
Yeah, I don't think it's a requirement either. I think that they're perfectly fine in the right list. You don't want to just slap one in there just to slap one in there. And I think really the only transport that we're really talking about here is the Impulsor.
Yeah.
Firstborn transports, there's no firstborn units we're running that needs a transport, or really can we afford to take one? I mean, Terminators would be nice, but Land Raiders are just way, way overpriced. And the same thing with Repulsors; they're just like horrendously overpriced. The Impulsor is really the transport of choice here, and what you're going to stick in it is going to be either Blade Guard or Sword Brethren, both of which benefit nicely from that. I think Sword Brethren probably benefit a little bit more from it, simply because they are a little squishier from not having that Storm Shield. But I don't think it's necessary to put them in a transport either. I think if it suits your list and what you're trying to accomplish, then it can work. But neither is it a requirement, right? So yeah. So neither is a bad choice. Just make sure that it synergizes with your list.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next one we've got is another sort of spicy, hotly discussed the topic is don't focus on ranged. BT are best in melee versus don't focus on melee. We need to be a balanced list. We've talked about this at length in a number of different videos and on our Discord. What's your take on this, Bob?
So, this is kind of funny because I'm going to be very contradictory based on some of our last videos. So, the
Which
meta
should we
is...
take, Bob?
Yeah, I
Yes.
know, right?
The answer is yes.
Yes. Honestly, there's no wrong answer here. So, take this one with a grain of salt on it. I lean towards you should have some shooting in your list. I mean, that's just help prevent some of your bad matchups if you have some shooting in your list, so you can deal with things, whether it be vehicles or maybe it's knights or elite infantry, something to that effect, so that you can contribute in all phases of the game. You want to have some shooting so that you can deal with your opponent. That's how I lean. However, there has been some skewed lists that go wide that have done really well in tournaments that have taken next to no shooting and they've still done well.
Yep.
So,
Yep, I remember, several lists where it was like, "Well, you've got no shooting this list." He's like, "No, I've got storm bolters on the Terminators." Okay. Right,
yep,
so I don't think we need to be like 100% balanced, like 50% shooting, 50.
yep,
I think that's a mistake because we really don't have any buffs to shooting. We have the Emperor's Will, and that's literally the only thing that we get, which is good for like Hellblasters and Centurions. But we're not going to be building around that strat, and we don't have any other really buffs that other Space Marines don't have as well, right? So we're going to take the units that stand on their own that are good. Um, I like Eradicators.
yep,
Las Fusel Eliminators are super cheap and cost efficient for what you get from them. So I think taking, 'cause like you said, some shooting. I personally wouldn't go full melee, but obviously people have had success with basically full melee. But your list has to be, well, number one, you have to know your list extremely well and what to do in certain circumstances. And number two, you have to have the right list for it, right? You can't just slap all melee on the board and expect it to just function. You've got to have a plan. You've got to know your opponents, and you've got to know what your opponent's armies are capable of. Um, so yeah, having some eradicators on the board to take care of some nasty targets, or to be another target for your opponent to maybe not shoot your melee instead. Um, Not a bad idea.
yep,
But I
exactly.
don't think I don't think we should be all melee. I don't think we should be necessarily like 50% shooting either.
Yeah,
We're somewhere in the middle.
yep, exactly. All right, to kind of build on that a little bit. So,
Yeah,
this is going to be yet another spicy one. All of these are kind of spicy, and I love them. That's why we kind of are doing this a little bit here. So,
yeah.
Redemptors are a poor use of points, and the macroplasma will betray you. Versus, what are you doing?
They're auto takes.
They're
Take
auto
three.
takes.
Why aren't you taking three?
So, what do you think,
Yeah.
Alex?
So I love Redemptors because I love dreadnoughts, right? So they're cool because they're dreadnoughts. They're big, stompy things. And when that macroplasma hits, man, it hits. But it is swingy. Like, so that's where the it will betray you come in. I mean, they are definitely swingy. I've had games where there was one game I played against my friend Patrick, who plays Nids, and I blew two Carnifexes off the board with two Redemptors on turn one. And I don't think I rolled below a 4 on shots the entire game with those things. And I've had other games where they've literally done nothing because I can't hit the broadside of a barn with the plasma. So they're swingy. I mean, that's D6 shots is swingy. There's nothing to say that, but you can. They certainly do hit hard. They have other guns too. I mean, their other guns are mainly good against light infantry, but they're also good in melee. So I mean, they're kind of a well-rounded package, even if they're plasma whiffs. You can still get use out of them, and they're a big fat target for other things to shoot at.
Yeah, for
So
195 points, you get a unit that has high ceiling that gives you one of your few really long range weapons at high damage that is not really impacted by -1 damage when you are dealing with it, because then
mhm.
your 3 damage goes to 2 damage, which is applicable in most cases for those -1 damage targets.
Overcharges life.
So that's a good thing. It also has the durability to charge into things, and it has a really really high damage close combat weapon. So it's great against things like
Hmm.
knights or vehicles or high uh, elite things. So it's great for that. However, however, if you're fighting something that has more bodies, or uh, or you just simply are not very good at rolling the plasma, something else might be a little bit might be better take.
If your luck is terrible,
Yeah, yeah.
if your luck is terrible, maybe consider a different unit.
So if your list is already full of melee units, maybe it's not necessarily a great take for you. Or if you're already overloading the center of the board, maybe it's not a great take for you. Or if you already have a bunch of guns, maybe it's not a great take. So it really depends on your
Yeah.
list. But redemptors aren't bad. I am not of the opinion that they're a trap. I think they're good all the way around. But you can build lists without them, and you'll do perfectly well.
Yeah, I think Armor of Contempt has really seen a resurgence in more infantry, right? Not so because early on, we were taking 2 and 3 Redemptors just by default, like every list,
Mhm.
right? That's kind of shifted now. We're seeing some of both. Some still running Redemptors, some running. I even some of my newer lists aren't running any Redemptors at all, even though I love the models and I think the Dreadnoughts are cool. Because I want to run more infantry. I want to put Terminators in there. I want to put Centurions in there, right? Um, so um, so yeah, it's one of those things. I think that now they're not auto takes, and yes, sometimes the plasma will betray you, but it's still a great unit, and don't shy away from it if you want to run it.
Yeah. So our next one is going to talk about litanies. So don't bother with Space Marine generic litanies versus the Black Templar litanies are way better. So what do you think?
So, yeah. Here's the thing: almost all of our litanies are excellent. Divine Protection is amazing, even with Grimaldus and an Apothecary on the board. It's literally double the amount of saves you're going to make. Plea of Deliverance is probably more important now than ever with all the psychers out there. Uh, you know, um, Stuff like that. Psalm, Fires, all good. Even Fervent, good, right? There isn't a bad litany that we have. So that makes the choices really tough, right? Especially when you look at the generic ones. Most of them, comparably, are just eh. However, Canticles of Hate is amazing.
Yes. Yes.
+2 to charge is stupid. And when you stick that on a fast chaplain like a jump pack dude or a biker chaplain, you're going to be able to be where you need to be to make sure that your dudes get charged. Now, if you're running a lot of jump pack troops and maybe you want to deep strike some of them and charge from deep strike, that's going to make your life a lot easier, right?
Yep.
And so, it, you definitely can still take litanies from the generic tree. Canticle of Hate is probably the best one, followed closely by Exhortation of Rage. +1 to
Yep.
wound is really, really good. So, you even if that's your only chaplain and you're running those two, that's fine. As long as your list supports, you know, what you're doing, you're gonna be okay. You don't have to take BT
Yep.
ones because there are good ones in the generic
Yep.
tree,
I agree with
just
pretty
not as
much
many.
everything you said there.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, well, what do we got next? This is another one that we've talked about. I know I've said this. Terminators are sturdy enough to always walk up the board. Don't bother deep striking them. Versus, I want to, you should deep strike them and charge from deep strike with that Canticles of Hate at +2 charge, right? Your thoughts
So
on
I
that?
think Terminators have the awesome benefit of being able to decide based on your opponent what you're going to be doing with it. So that's the great little tool with it. Now, if you're doing like the aura bubble with your apothecaries and Helbrecht, and you're intentionally built your list to revolve around Terminators walking up the board, then obviously Deep Strike is probably not a good idea for you. But you'd have to
Yeah.
build your lists around that. But if you aren't doing all
Yeah.
of these little buffs on your Terminators, and maybe you have some relic Terminators that are dropping it, or you have on the board with some maybe lightning claws or chain fists or something to that effect, and maybe storm bolters. Maybe they don't have to run up the board. Maybe you can deep strike them to pin your opponent back in their deployment zone. It's very effective potentially. Now you have to be aware that they're probably going to screen you, but if you build the rest of your list correctly and you can drive to the center of the board, you're going to force them to play a little bit defensively if you are going to hold them in deep strike, and maybe you can get them to play a little bit reactive using some deep strike on your Terminators. I don't think it's necessary. You need to keep them on the board every game. I think against the right opponent or on the right mission, that's a play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I mean, Terminators can be combat squatted.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to take 10, you can split them up and deep strike them, which is a valid play. The only thing you have to be careful if you're going to do that is if you plan to have like the Death Star blob of, multiple character support with the apothecary resing, the brother Chadius every turn or whatever, and now you're going to split them up and deep strike them. You better have another unit in your army that can
Yep.
benefit from that apothecary's ability instead, right? Something else, maybe a blade guard or a blob of sword brethren or something like that, right? Something that he can walk around with because he's slow,
Yep.
and still benefit from that ability. Because otherwise, now you've got a character who's following like assault intercessors or something ridiculous, and that's a waste of points, right? So yeah, I think your most recent tournament list has two squads of 5-man relic
Yep.
termies, right? That you plan on deep striking most of the
Yeah,
time.
actually, I do. I probably played 2 dozen games with them, and I nearly every game I am deep striking them. So
Yeah,
my list is
yeah.
very
So
aggressive. So I push the center of the board and I deep strike them, and it holds my opponent back into their deployment zone because they don't want to lose their home objective to relic terminators.
yeah, coming in.
Yep.
Hello. So yeah. Again, it depends on your list and it depends on your opponent and what you're trying to accomplish. So neither one of those is a wrong answer. All right. So what do we got next?
Just ignore the Emperor's Champion and the Bathe Your Blood secondary. They're both unusable.
What an untemplar thing to say. Just so I mean, here's the thing with the Emperor's Champion. A lot of people don't like him because he doesn't buff the army and Hellworked is better and blah 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 whatever. Um, but he's only 100 points, and he's a he's a pretty good beat stick character for 100 points. He's got a lot of
Mhm.
buffs on him himself. So even though he's not buffing the army, I think again, this is one of those circumstances where it depends on your list. I think if you're going to run a transport with some Sword Brethren or Blade Guard, slapping the Emperor's Champion in there, it's pretty good
Yep.
take because now you got a deadly melee unit and a beat stick character, who can do some nasty stuff to squishy enemy characters, or even not so squishy enemy characters. He's pretty
Yep.
beefy in combat. Um, so I think again if you build your list to carry him, now if you're just tossing him in there just to toss him in there, then and he's foot slogging, yeah, he's not gonna
Yep.
perform as well as you'd probably hoped, right? But if you build a list to specifically cater to what he needs to do and where he needs to go, then yeah, he can
Yep.
absolutely work. As for the secondary, I think um, I think it has its uses. I don't think are you going to go to, GTS and Nova Open and whatever with this secondary? No. But casual pickup games, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, when you're just playing against friends and people who aren't top tournament players, or only tournament players that this is all they do is play tournaments. Um, it's definitely going to catch your opponents off guard, especially when you're like, that dude who I know you need on the front lines to buff your dudes, he's my target, right? So it can mess with your opponent's psychology. So I think in casual games, it's a solid 10 points
Yeah,
probably.
I agree. And I wouldn't play it in a tournament. Kind of soured a little bit on it. It just I don't like secondaries that you cannot have an input on or your opponent has an influence on, and I feel like even if you're going to select your opponent's HQ, they probably will just hide it, because ultimately points matter.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
like Alex said, casual games, he synergizes spectacular the EC and the Bathe Your Blood. So
Yeah. Yep.
if you're just bringing your army to your local game store, throw down. Why not? It's
Yeah.
fluffy, and you're probably gonna score that 10 points. Because your
Yeah.
casual opponent.
Because you don't have to. You only need 15. You get the 15 if the dude you selected kills him. If you just kill him in melee,
Yeah,
that's 10 points automatically. So if you get 10 points out of it, I
yeah,
consider that a win. All right. So we don't need uphold because we have armor of contempt versus uphold is still useful against a lot of armies due to the transhuman ability, the mini transhuman. Thoughts on
yeah.
this?
Honestly, the uphold has its place. So it's not as prevalent as it used to be. It's not going to be
Definitely
the
not an
auto
auto
take that
take.
it was prior to AOC. Uh, but I don't buy the notion that we're never taking armor or uphold anymore. A lot of people have said this, that you don't take it, you're going to be doing accepting challenge every time. No, 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 no. I would even say 50% of the time you're probably still taking uphold simply because you want that transhuman against high damage things. And honestly,
High
you're
strength things.
probably gonna even still need that 5+ invulnerable against some of those armies too, because they have such high AP.
I'm taking it against Snids
Yep.
because Kraken AP5 Raveners, no thanks. I'll take my 5+ on my
Mhm.
Neophyte. So,
I mean, there's still plenty of armies where
so
it's
yeah,
very very useful.
yeah, Knights is another one. They have real lots of high
Hmm.
strength stuff. Um, so even into some Marines, I think it's worthwhile. Like uh, Blood Angels and Death Guard because they have ways to easily wound you on twos. -1 to your toughness, +1 to wound. Those things will make you and that's going to depend on your opponent's list, right? So you're facing Blood Angels. What do their weapons look like? Is it a lot of
Hmm.
strength five? If it is, they're going to be one on twos. If it's not a lot of strength five, then probably go with a accepting a challenge. But these are things to consider, and I think it's still definitely worth considering. Just you got to measure your opponent's list, and that's the great thing about vows is we get to choose when we say their list. We don't
Yeah.
have to choose ahead of time. So
All right, so the next one is going to be anti-Zerker tools are too specific. Don't waste the CP and points on them when you don't know if you'll fight a Zerker versus the defense is always nice to have, even if you don't use it.
always have psychic defense. There's too many armies. I'm gonna swing to the opposite. They always take
Yep.
something, because there's too many armies with too many psychic powers, and if your only psychic defense is, oh, I got a strat for a 4 up, you're going to get wrecked at the wrong time with it. And we actually just talked about what I had a Templar stip video, what to deny with your denies, and you can see that video right here. So I think that do we need to take everything? No, but it depends on also your meta, right? If you a run in a meta where there's like almost no psychers, then you can probably get away with very little, right? If you have a variety of different armies, you're gonna want something. And if you're running Grimaldus, I'd make him your warlord and give him his warlord trait because that's two denies at +1.
Yep.
That's solid just by
Yep.
itself.
So I definitely think that we need something, additional in addition to our CP stratagem. We do get the 5 ups against mortals, which helps.
Yep.
If you're taking your Maldus, you have some built-in denies. If you're taking something that we're going to talk about in a little bit here, an Inquisitor, you with the Zerk, you have a deny on him. We'll get to them in a few minutes here, but you need to have something. It's not as bad as it used to be
Mhm.
in when Leviathan, uh, Nids came out first. You're just getting blasted off the board with psychic powers. It's not quite as bad now, and even the Eldar and things of that nature have found out to be not quite as bad. But you still need something because you can
Yeah.
still have hard counters like Thousand Suns who can really wreck you, or Grey Knights if
Yep.
you don't have a way to deal with them. So
Well, and Plea of Deliverance just got a lot better with the semi-recent FAQ, where they talked about how now not only can that unit not be affected by psychic powers, but any buffs that your opponent's unit gets that affects their attacks also
yeah,
have no effect on you. So if they get +1 to hit, or +1 to wound, or whatever the power gives them, exploding sixes, whatever, doesn't work. So that makes Plea of Deliverance that much better. And I mean, a litany that litany can, if you position the unit right, can single-handedly shut down an army like Grey Knights or Thousand Suns, because it's like, oh, cool, all your
yeah,
smites don't work.
or a good chunk.
so
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah, so a good chunk, yeah. So I think we need to have something. Don't rely just on our solely on our Feel No Pain and our strat. Have some kind of deny, whether it's a Grimaldus or uh, you know even a filthy Psyker Inquisitor. Speaking of which, don't take Inquisitors. BT don't use Psychers versus, hey, they're handy for psychic interrogation. I think we already know which side of the fence I'm on this. What about
I
you?
think if you are okay with bending the laws of the Imperium
The
and
laws.
the Black Templars and killing your Inquisitor after every game, I like that strategy. Yeah, just
Throw
this
that
throw them
model
like
out.
another one. Just have a stockpile of Inquisitors in the fleet. Just
Speed paint those guys.
I think it's a good consistent way to get your psychic defense. You can get CP generation out of them. They're really cheap. You can get pretty consistent secondary points out of them. I think it's a good competitive take, honestly. But only if you
Yeah.
are one of the people that don't mind bending the fluff a little bit.
So, I mean, Inquisitors have fought alongside Black Templars
Yep.
before. That's
Gray
not something
facts.
we've never fought against. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, like they have fought alongside us guys before. So, I mean, it's not like it's completely unheard of for Black Templars. But, it's up to you if that's your personal preference or not. Me personally, I don't like to run one, but I do see the value and the merit of it in, a list that you're trying to win a tournament, a high level tournament with. It makes sense. It opens up a pretty easy secondary, so I personally won't do it, but if you don't care about that bit, then go for it
What
because
are you
it's
trying
a
to say?
valid tactic.
Gunlight Templars.
I'm nothing. Yeah, your gunline Templars, right? Exactly. All right. So, another one that is near and dear to my heart, which is the argument of, oh, sword brethren are weak. Use blade guard instead versus don't use blade guard. There's too much -1 damage in the meta. This was a back and forth. It's still
Hmm.
kind of back and forth. We actually did a video on it was how to use sword brethren, but we did talk about how they compare to blade guard. You can see that video here. It's a little stale. It came out well before AOC, so I mean, you know, that's mainly the thing that's changed is sword brethren now get armor of contempt, which means they're
Yep.
just that much more durable.
I
What's your
think
take,
that
Bob?
the Sword Brethren have play. They're a cheap alternative, even though Blade Guard Veteran are cheap already, where you can put some you your damage on the board. You know, you can take them in 4-man squads. You can take them in 5-man squads. You can take them in 10-man squads to
Mhm.
do damage. I put them in impulsors in a couple of units and impulsors that you can adjust the weaponry as you need it before the battle, and give them some character support to be able to do what you need on the board. I think they're a good Swiss Army knife that also, if you're taking things like accept any challenge, that you can utilize the fallback if you need to be able to do what you need to do strategically.
Yep,
Uh,
because they
they ignore
ignore
passions. So
passions.
I think that they have place in specific lists. You have to build around them, utilizing them in a specific way in your list. They can't be the focus of the list, but they have to be a complementary piece to what the rest of your list is doing.
Yeah,
Whereas the Blade Guard Veteran have a specific role of I'm going to park them on an objective, come at me or don't, because I'm durable enough to sit here. And if you do come close, then I'm going to attack you.
and deadly enough to kill you anyway. Yeah. Well, and I mean, to your point, you do want to make sure that you're building your list around sword brethren. They're not a piece that you can
Yeah.
just go, I'm going to toss some sword brethren in this list. Versus a blade guard, you can just go, I'm just going to toss 3 blade guard in this list. I got an extra 105 points, and they'll work because you just plunk them on an objective and they don't die. So, different schools of thought there. As far as Blade Guard with, being bad because -1 damage, honestly, they're not going to be your primary
Yeah.
combat unit. They shouldn't be, right? Even if you're running 2, um, they are really a secondary combat unit because uh, even if there's no -1 damage, they're so durable that you want them, like you said, park them on an objective mid board and dare your opponent to try and take them from you because they're going to hit back really hard and they're going to take a punch. So, that's really their focus, in my opinion. They can certainly murder stuff. Damage to weapons are still good, even in a world where there's plenty of things that are -1 damage. Um, but I think that they are definitely still a
Yep.
valid
Absolutely.
unit, both of them. Um, just make sure you're building your
Yep.
list to what
Absolutely.
you need.
All right.
What else you got,
Troops
Bob?
suck versus you got to have some infiltrators and incursives.
You gotta take them. You
And
can't
we've had
not.
videos about this, right? So I
What do
talked
you
about
think?
my philosophy. We did a stream on them and how I talked about how you really want to have some
Yep.
concealed positions in the board. Do I think you absolutely have to have infiltrators or incursors? No, I don't. I just feel it puts you in a better position to win if you do that. But you should have some concealed position in your list, whether it be eliminators or invictors or whatever you want to put in there. Doesn't have to necessarily be
Yep.
infiltrators or incursors. But the other thing is, you
Thump.
absolutely do need the ability of troops to score objectives. If you do not, then you're kind of putting yourself in a hurt bag because a lot of armies do have really good troops and they're spamming them a lot,
Hmm.
and they're going to overtake that objective if you don't have something to take it or to hold it.
Yep. And we don't really want to be spending 3 CP on a
Yeah,
Vanguard.
absolutely.
we want the free battalion is what we want. So you gotta take some troops. They're gonna sit on objectives, or maybe they'll do stuff. Crusader squads are probably the best Space Marine troop. Uh, One of maybe tied with infiltrators. That we have access to because it's a solid combat
Yeah.
unit for the points. 178 points. You get a power sword, two power fists, and a whole truckload of chain swords is really good value. And especially if you're pairing those crusaders with a bunch of other more deadly, more scary things, melee units and whatnot, your opponent is
Yep.
less likely to focus on those, and then you're gonna surprise them when you melee
Yep.
something to death with crusaders. So, you know, um, and Crusaders work really well with Uphold the Honor because, oh, your AP3 whatever shots, I'm going to save that on my 5 plus Neophyte. Thank you very much. So, congratulations, you killed a 16-point model. So, yeah, I mean, our troops, generally speaking, aside from Crusaders, like going to be like deadly and whatever, you're not taking them for any kind of damage output. You're taking them for the other
Yep.
things that they provide. OBSEC bodies to sit on objectives, area denial of deep strike, and things like concealed positions where I can go, I got this objective turn one,
Yep.
and now you got to come get it from me. So that's why you're taking troops, not because of any
Yeah.
DPS
It
that they bring to the board,
there
because they
isn't
don't.
any troop tax, so to speak, in ninth edition. You absolutely do want to have troops.
Mm,
They
I don't think so.
just
Yeah,
thinking about having to leave a Terminator squad on your home objective because you don't have a troop squad in your list just is feels bad all the way around. So I mean, you should have them. Honestly, if you're starting to
yeah,
build a list without them, I would maybe consider doing something else because you really want to have some troops of some kind. So I don't necessarily think they have to be infiltrators or
yeah,
incursor, but those are excellent choices.
yep. So next up is another one of my favorite units. Use Centurions because they're good versus they suck because they don't have core. So what do you think?
If you like Centurions, they're a great unit. Even without core,
Assault
even
Centurions.
though they changed, yes, Assault
Assault
Centurions.
Centurions. Devastator
Even
ones
though,
just are devastatingly bad.
so yes, they changed Oath a Moment, so they're not quite as good at their role, but they have devastatingly powerful shooting. They're devastatingly powerful in close combat, and your opponent will want nothing to do with them, especially if you're doing our quote unquote chattiest
Brother Sergeant Chadius. Let me tell you something about him.
with our
I'm a true believer in Brother Sergeant Chadius because this dude tanked a 9-man squad of double bone sword Tyranid warriors, uh, and had one wound left. So he's stupid. So
yeah.
they're really deadly in combat. Their shooting is, in and of itself. You look at the stat lines, they're like, boy, that's not good. But it's volume of fire that counts, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to pick up like squads and squads of Marines? No, but they're going to clear chaff easily. You point them at Gaunts, you point them at Guardsmen, anything that's T3, even T4 with one wound and a not so great save, you're going to murder it because
Yep.
they just have so many shots. It's ridiculous. And, Centurions, no, they don't have core, which, hurts them to a little certain extent. But honestly, the only thing uh, that I really miss from core, not from them not getting buffs from basically anywhere except an apothecary, is maybe re-rolls to hit. That's about the only place where I would like some benefits. Otherwise, I can get a field of pain from the apothecary. He reses them. Um, you know, it's not all that necessary. So If you want to take them, they're absolutely worth taking. You want to take five, 4 to 5, probably, because you want them. They're going to get shot. They're going to get charged, maybe. You want to make sure that you are taking enough that the apothecary has dudes to resurrect, right? Because the squad's got to be alive. And then you got to take that master of the chief apothecary upgrade. That's 100% worth it because if you resurrect Brother Sergeant Chadius once, that's an 80-point model. You've basically almost paid for the apothecary right then and there with
Yep.
one time. 80 points. So if you can do it twice, you're basically playing a list with 2,160 points in it versus your opponent's 2,000 points, right? So that's uh, a ton of things that you can put back on the board, right? A ton of points that you can put back on the board for them. So um,
Yep.
I've had good success with them. They've done very well in my games that I've used them in. So if you like them, take them. But uh, you know they're not required either.
Yep. So I feel like the Assault Centurions are an excellent take if they are your type of unit. Not everyone likes using them. They don't like the look of them, that type of thing, but they're an excellent unit. I don't think there will ever be a case where I will say that they aren't good unless they get nerfed.
Yeah.
So right now, even though they lack core, they are an awesome unit in your list if that your list fits that way. We've been talking about it for a year and a half since even before the supplement came out.
Yep.
So they're a great unit.
Yep. And Armor of Contempt only makes them that much better. Anything with a 2
Yep.
plus save with Armor of Contempt is amazing.
All right. So speeders are too expensive versus speeders have great mobility. What do you say?
Speeders are cheap, man. I don't know how anyone would think they're too expensive. They're cheap. The question is, are we still running them? And I don't see many people running them. I'm not really fitting them into my lists either because I want more infantry. But they're still a good unit. Um, there's nothing wrong with them. They're fast. They have fly. They're not core, so whatever. Uh, but honestly, they're so fast. Like, what do you? Who's going to be buffing them? You're flying that thing across the board with its 18-inch move.
Yep.
So they're I like to call they're what a unit that I like to call a popcorn unit. Because I don't care if my opponent kills it, but it's really kind of too deadly for them to ignore it. One of those
Yep.
things. So it's gonna soak some firepower.
So I still think they're good, but I think there's other takes that are better now. They're still a great multi-melta carrier, but the meta has evolved over the past year with all the different codexes that have come out, where we don't necessarily need all of the melta carriers anymore.
Hmm.
We have eradicators, we have different options for the melta. But what we really need now is the ability to have something fast, but also have enough bodies to contest objectives, because that's where we've kind of settled in our games, right?
Yeah.
We need to have something that has enough bodies, either OBSEC or enough regular bodies like an assault squad or a Vanguard veteran squad that can contest via bodies an objective. Because we want to be playing the trade game so we can get objectives and deny our opponents those objectives, where a single model vehicle is not going to do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't have the rules of the Imperial Knights, where it counts as five. Or else I would be like, dude,
Oh
take
my
it
god.
every time.
Just take 3 squads.
But
Right.
unfortunately, not.
Yeah.
So, still a good take if you need to have some multi melta, but I think there's better takes nowadays.
Yeah. You need action monkeys versus there are better secondaries. So, uh, what's your take on this?
I think there is one secondary that you probably need a list or You need something in your list to be able to do actions, um, unless you're taking psychic secondaries, which point you're using an Inquisitor. But raise the banners. And really, when you're advancing up the board with your troops and your other units that you're not engaging the enemy first turn really anyway, you can put all your banners up the first turn, and then you don't have to worry about it. So you don't really need action monks anymore, because what we needed them before was, R&D, or otherwise known as Rod, or whatever you would prefer to call it.
Whatever the hell it's called now. Retrieve
Yeah,
data. Retrieve insert
no.
current GT book name data here.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
I think that was the main one.
you need action monkeys. Guess what? They're already in your list. They're called troops.
Yeah,
And assault marines. Those are your action monkeys. You need a fast one? Assault marines. 90 points, jump packs, flamers. Run up the board, do the banners. You know what I mean? Like they're already in your list. We don't
yeah,
need like uh squads of what do you call them? Veterans to do that anymore. Because we're not running the retrieve data one. It's just not worth it. And we're not, there are some secondaries or some second primaries in some of the missions that are actions, but again, that's what your troops are for. That's another good thing because who cares if they can't shoot? Their shooting probably sucks anyway. It's just some bolters, right?
yeah,
We're not worried about. You're not losing out like 10 heavy melta shots because you do an action with them, right? That's not what's happening. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, we kind of do need action monkeys for, some things, but they're already in our list. We don't need to take a special unit for them.
yeah.
So,
Early in ninth edition, I would say the opposite, but
well, and
it,
that was before they nerfed the hell out of bodyguard, right?
yeah,
So they served a second purpose, right? They're action monkeys and you can't shoot this character.
yeah.
So,
The game has evolved in the different seasons, so I
yep,
don't think we need them now.
yep, absolutely. Last but not least, you need accept any challenge to kill Marines. There's no good consistent sources of extra AP in the army. Versus don't take accept any challenge because you can't fall back and you need your insert shooty unit here to do work.
All right, so I disagree that you absolutely need to have accept any challenge to kill Marines. We have a ton of units in our list that are great at doing that specifically, whether it be Vanguard veterans or it
Hmm.
be assault terminators. There's a ton of different things. Blade Guard veteran, even Sword Brethren in the right setup. I mean, honestly, you don't necessarily even need it. It's great to have it. It'll
Yeah,
give you that just a little bit more consistency, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's
yeah.
necessary.
We've kind
But
of already talked about this too earlier when we talked about uphold.
yeah,
There's other ways for us to get into a combat, assault doctrine if we really need to. If you're that worried about it, take the Crusader helm. It's still a good relic.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, and not being able to fall back, yes, it's kind of a problem against some opponents, uh, but you know,
just kill it instead. Then you don't need to fall back.
well, don't always have to kill things to score points, though. But
Right.
that's another
Exactly.
video for another time.
Anyway, so that's our kind of take on the contradicting statements that seem to be floating around out there. What what ones have you heard that maybe we didn't mention? What are your takes on some of the things that we talked about? Let us know down in the description. Also, make sure you hit that like button and hit the subscribe so you can get notified on all of our latest content. We have a Patreon page. We greatly appreciate all the support our Patreons give us. So come check us out there. You get early access to videos, um, exclusive polls, things like that. Special roles in the Discord. Speaking of which, we have a Discord, great community of folks. Ton of discussion there every day about Black Templars and how to run it and list advice. Everything you need is in that Discord as well. So come check us out there. And until next time, keep on crusading.